This case started on a freezing Saturday night in December 1991 in Austin, Texas. Two 17-year-old girls named Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were co-workers at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt store at the Northcross Mall. It was almost 11 o'clock at night, and their shift was about to end. A little bit after 10 o'clock, Jennifer's sister, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, and her friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, were hanging around the mall. They were waiting for the girls' shift to end since the four of them were going to a slumber party together that night. To avoid being late to the party, Sarah and Amy entered the store to assist Eliza and Jennifer close up in time. It was already 12 o'clock, and Officer Troy Gay of the Austin Police Department was on patrol that evening when he saw smoke coming from the strip mall. Firefighters quickly arrived on the scene after the officer called in. They soon discovered a horrifying scene while putting out the fire. In the store, the lifeless bodies of Jennifer, Sarah, Amy, and Eliza were strewn across the floor. It was obvious that they had been ruthlessly murdered. The teenagers were all bound and gagged in their own clothes while completely naked. Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza were found in the rear of the back room, huddled into one corner, while Amy's body was recovered in the middle of the back room. Sarah and Eliza were piled on top of one another, and Jennifer was lying nearby. The girls' legs were wide open, and one of them had an ice cream scoop tucked in between it. The killer or killers had gathered napkins and other combustible materials from about the shop, doused the victims with lighter fluid, and then set the place on fire before escaping, leaving their bodies almost completely burned beyond recognition. Their autopsy results revealed that they had all been shot execution-style in the back of the heads. Additionally, 2 or more of the girls had experienced sexual assault. Authorities also disclosed to the media that 2 firearms had been used in the killings, raising the possibility of at least 2 killers. Police investigators and the management of the yogurt shop determined that $540 also was taken from the shop. It was unclear if the girls had been targeted particularly because someone knew they would be alone inside the store that night, or if the intended purpose had been a robbery, and the culprit had then recognized a chance to take advantage of them. Lead detective John Jones and his partner, Mike Huckabee, launched an immediate investigation into the case. There were several problems with the investigation right away. First of all, the firefighters who responded to the crime scene did their jobs, but ultimately washed away important forensic evidence in the process. Furthermore, Austin had only one fingerprint unit at the beginning of the 1990s, which lacked forensic expertise. Additionally, there was only one homicide investigator working the shift the night of the murders due to the limited number of the city's homicide squad. Despite the police department's shortcomings, Detectives Jones and Huckabee had quite a large number of suspects. The police station's phones were ringing non-stop as tips poured in. When faced with 342 suspects and scores of fake confessions, the investigators became overwhelmed. The investigators started by looking into possible local serial killers due to the graphic nature of the crime and the staging of the teenagers' bodies. This led them to Kenneth Allen McDuff. Kenneth Allen McDuff was a Texas serial killer who is thought to have committed at least 14 murders. On August 6, 1966, he was found guilty of killing 3 teenagers named Robert Brand, Mark Dunman, and Edna Louise Sullivan. These killings were known as the broomstick murders, because Edna's neck was broken like a broomstick after she had been sexually abused numerous times. For his crimes, Kenneth Allen McDuff was given a death sentence, but in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to end the death penalty in a 5-4 ruling, and his sentence was altered to life in prison with the chance of parole. He was granted parole in 1989 as a result of prison overpopulation. It is however believed that Kenneth Alan MacDuff further committed numerous killings upon his parole, including the 1992 slaying of Melissa Ann Northrup, a 22-year-old Texan. After many years of eluding authorities, MacDuff was ultimately apprehended and put on death row. On November 17, 1998, the day before he was put to death, he admitted to killing the 4 teenagers at the yogurt store. He was foolish if he believed that making this last-minute confession would save his life. That day, as planned, he was put to death. Detectives looked into MacDuff's confession but disregarded him when fingerprints and hair taken from the yogurt store could not be used to identify him as the killer. Days after the brutal killing of the girls, investigators received a tip to look into a teenager named Maurice Pierce. Maurice Pierce was a 16-year-old boy who was spotted with a gun that night at the Northcross Mall where Sarah and Amy were hanging out before going to the yogurt store. The weapon was a handgun with a .22 caliber, the same caliber as one of the weapons used to kill the girls. However, nothing came out from the lead when detectives Jones and Huckabee questioned Pierce along with his 3 friends who accompanied him to the mall. Ballistics analysis of Maurice Pierce's gun revealed that it did not match the murder weapon. Additionally, just like with MacDuff, none of the 4 suspects were identified by the fingerprints and hair samples taken from the crime site. The detectives eventually moved on from this. The case was given to new detectives after years went by without any arrests. Then, in 1999, Forrest Wellburn, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Maurice Pierce, 4 earlier suspects now in their 20s, were apprehended for the killings at the yogurt store. These were the same suspects who had been questioned 8 days prior to the girls' deaths and had been let go due to a lack of evidence. Michael Scott, one of the suspects, admitted to the murders. He wasn't alone though. Robert Springsteen also admitted to killing the girls and raping one of them. The police were sure they had their killers after these confessions. According to the theory, the 4 boys had intended to rob the yogurt shop. Forrest Wellburn waited outside and kept watch as Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Maurice Pierce entered the store. The theft went horribly wrong, though, and all of the females were killed. The allegations against Wellburn were dropped after the authorities made 2 attempts to indict him for the killings, but were unable to do so due to a lack of evidence connecting him to the crime. Charges against Maurice Pierce were also dropped due to a lack of evidence, which was extremely difficult for the police and the families of the victims to accept, because he was thought to be the mastermind behind the crime and the subsequent killings. Both Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were found guilty of capital murder after separate trials for the yogurt store killings. The state of Texas had approved a new death penalty statute, making it feasible for Robert Springsteen to receive the death penalty even after the Supreme Court decision in 1972. But Michael Scott received a 99-year jail sentence. However, shortly after their trials, grave questions were presented that showed Springsteen and Scott might not have been guilty. In the beginning, there was no tangible proof connecting any of them to the crime. Both men added that their confessions had been forced upon them, and there was some proof to support their assertions. One of the detectives working on the case was reassigned after it was claimed that he had forced confessions in an unrelated case. Additionally, a picture of another Austin police officer aiming a gun at Scott's head during questioning surfaced. Both convictions were overturned by the courts after they determined that they had violated Springsteen and Scott's Sixth Amendment right to confront their accuser. This came 15 years after the yogurt shop killings were perpetrated. During the trial, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's confessions were used against each other, but their attorneys were never permitted to cross-examine the accuser. It was determined that their constitutional rights had been violated as a result. Later, in 2008, DNA testing on the evidence gathered from the crime scene revealed that neither Scott nor Springsteen's DNA, nor that of any other persons accused of the crime, matched the results. According to then Travis County District Attorney Rosemary Lemberg, the yogurt store murder was committed by Scott and Springsteen, but the men would not be charged again until the unknown man linked to the DNA evidence at the crime scene was located. The majority of law enforcement officials continue to believe that the original 4 suspects were the culprits and that the DNA evidence implicating a 5th suspect was a fabrication. The 5th suspect argument, according to Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's defense attorneys, is absurd, and they emphasized that no one ever brought up a 5th suspect before the inconvenient DNA results came in. According to some attorneys, investigators, family members, and armchair detectives who have studied this case, the killers of the teenagers may have been 2 unnamed customers who were at the yogurt store right before it closed. Although 52 customers who had come into the store on the day of the murders were reportedly questioned by the police, 2 individuals who witnesses said were present at closing time have never been located. 3 customers left the store shortly before it closed, and on their way out, they reportedly saw 2 males seated in a booth, and they didn't appear to be planning to leave anytime soon. Perhaps the men ordered a soft drink. When Jennifer and her co-worker decided to close the store, at least one of the customers witnessed her lock the front door and post a closed sign to prevent any additional customers from coming in. After all the other customers had left, only the 2 men in the booth remained. Witnesses gave the following descriptions of the persons of interest. One is around 5 foot 6 inches tall and has lighter hair, maybe like a dirty blonde. He seemed in his late 20s through early 30s. The second man is noted as being larger. Both were dressed in larger jackets, one of which was green, an army fatigue kind of looking jacket, the other had a black jacket. Neither of these males has been named as of yet. In the end, it is debatable if robbery was really the true motivation in this instance. It is difficult to believe that these killings were just the outcome of a robbery gone wrong, given the meager sum of money seized and the high level of violence. The likelihood that the murder was committed with sexual motivation, and that the murderers only grabbed the money as an afterthought is substantially higher. It's possible that one of the girls knew the murderers, or it's possible that Sarah and Amy were followed from the mall to the yogurt store. Linking the DNA evidence discovered at the scene to the 2 male customers who were observed by witnesses lingering in the yogurt shop after closure could hold the key to solving this case. The 1991 murders at the yogurt business altered the city of Austin irrevocably. The murders were referred to by the then mayor as the crime where Austin lost its innocence. Residents of Austin began to doubt the safety of their community after the brutal and untimely deaths of 4 young girls who still had their entire lives ahead of them. The I Can't Believe It's yogurt store was converted into a nail salon, but a plaque honoring Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, Amy Ayers, and Eliza Thomas still stands in the parking lot beneath a large oak tree, serving as a reminder to anybody passing by that the murder case is yet to be solved and that justice is yet to be served. What do you think about this case, friends? Who do you think killed the girls? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and please like and support my channel by subscribing.